Vamos a dar aquí la bienvenida al afamado, casi rockstar del mundo Bitcoin, Andreas Antonopoulos.
How much time would you like to speak? I think 20, 30 minutes is... All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry I can't do this in Spanish. Actually, you're probably glad I can't do this in Spanish because, oh boy, my Spanish is terrible. So I'll just do this in English. The topic of this talk is the Bitcoin revolution. And I'm here to talk about why Bitcoin is revolutionary, but also why Bitcoin is not revolutionary. Here's a really interesting historical quote. I think it's from George Orwell. He said, "In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." When everybody's lying, telling the truth is revolutionary. And in financial terms, we live at a time of universal deceit. We live at a time when the way finance works and the way money works is a giant lie. It's a scam. And Bitcoin is a revolutionary system primarily because it's not a currency. Because if it was a currency, it would just be a small incremental change from what we had before. You know, a lot of people say Bitcoin is a digital currency, which doesn't really mean anything because all currencies are digital currencies, right? The paper that you hold is maybe 8% of total currency. 92% of it is digital. The peso is a digital currency. The US dollar is a digital currency. Bitcoin is not a digital currency. Bitcoin is something else. And because it is something else, it is fundamentally different from what has come before, and that's what makes it revolutionary and not just evolutionary. Bitcoin is a trust platform. It is a system for communicating trust. It is a system for assigning trust to a network. It is a system for allowing people to express value in transactions with trust without having to trust each other. And currency is not really part of the system, it's an application. It's an absolutely necessary application within the system, but Bitcoin isn't a currency. Currency is an application that runs on top of Bitcoin. And if you study Bitcoin carefully, you start noticing that the things that you expect to be there are not actually there. They're an illusion. Let me give you an example. There are no coins. There are no coins in Bitcoin. No coins. There are no serial numbers of coins. There are no coins created. Bitcoin doesn't have coins at all. If you look at the source code, you won't find any coins. You'll find transactions. And these transactions, as a primary unit, have previous transactions. Unspent transaction outputs, as they're called, no coins. Bitcoin has no coins. If you look at a transaction, you discover other strange things. What would you assume would be in a transaction? You assume that it would have kind of the same things you see on a check, maybe. A sender, a recipient, an amount. Now look inside a transaction. There's no sender. There's no recipient. There's no sender address. There's no recipient address. These things don't actually exist inside Bitcoin. These are things that we create on top of Bitcoin in wallets. In Bitcoin, there is no balance. Part of the reason there's no balance is because there is no address. All of these things are constructs that we build above Bitcoin. A transaction consists of outputs transmitted from one locking script to another locking script based on the presentation of an unlocking script, which may be a digital signature. And that's a lot of technical words to say that when you look at Bitcoin, what you find is a strange world without the things that you think were there. Coins, senders, addresses, balances, those things don't exist. In fact, it's a bit like looking at the world through the eyes of chemistry, and then looking at the world through the eyes of atomic physics, right? There is no oxygen. There's protons and neutrons and electrons, and if you arrange them in a specific way, you get oxygen, or lead, or nickel. But at a fundamental level, there's no such thing as oxygen. Oxygen isn't a thing. Oxygen is a pattern. It's a design, a specific design of protons and electrons. And if you put them together in that way, you get oxygen. If you put them together in a different way, you get something completely different. But at a fundamental level, it's an abstraction. The same thing applies to Bitcoin. The building blocks of Bitcoin are these atomic elements of trust. And these atomic elements of trust are guaranteed by the network, and they create all of the things that we see in Bitcoin. Elements of trust like the validation of cryptographic signatures, of timestamps, the block mechanism, and mining mechanism. All of these can be combined. And for the most of us, when we use Bitcoin, we're using a very specific combination of these elements to create the illusion of Bobby sends 1 Bitcoin to Mary to pay for a cup of coffee. That construct, that sentence that we create on top of Bitcoin is one of the sentences you can create. But you can create other sentences. Multi-signature, payment channels, side chains, Lightning Network, counterparty, additional currencies, tokens, assets. All of these things are simply other sentences. They're simply other things we create by putting the fundamental elements together. And so Bitcoin is this illusion. It's a fundamental machine of trust that creates currency, that creates a payment network, and it can create much, much more. And as we progress in this environment in Bitcoin, people are taking these fundamental constructs and inventing new sentences, new ways of doing things with Bitcoin that have never been done before. There's nothing revolutionary in that. From a technology perspective, what we have here is an architecture that is low-level enough to be able to express many different possible financial systems. That's not a system designed to destroy international banking, but it will. It's not a system designed to strip the illusion of national currencies, just like in the 70s we got rid of national airlines, but it will. It's not a system designed to subvert the points of control of international banking and dramatically shift the power to those who own the money rather than those who hold the money. To strip out intermediaries, to remove control points. It's not designed to do those things, but it will. And the reason it will is because it is a very simple system designed with a few basic principles in mind. Sound money, individual control. Sound money, individual control. Two very simple concepts. What's revolutionary about those? What is revolutionary about individual control of money? Who is scared of having people control their own money? Because what we really should be asking is, why are you scared of having people control their own money? There's nothing revolutionary in Bitcoin unless you accept that we live in a time of universal deceit. There was nothing universal about Galileo grinding 2 pieces of glass and attaching them to the ends of the tube and pointing them at the sky and seeing the stars. Because it was just a tube with just 2 pieces of glass. But in that context, at that time, that was a supremely revolutionary act, because in that context at that time, to have direct access to the heavens was the exclusive area of the Catholic Church, and if you tried to do that, you were murdered, right? And to put together two pieces of glass and point at the skies was a revolutionary act of the utmost audacity. And yet, it's just a tube with two pieces of glass. It wasn't the tube that made it revolutionary. It was the system of lies in which that power was wielded that made it a revolutionary act. And in a system where we still believe the lie that a currency gets its value not because people use it, but because of who issues the currency, because of which queen is printed on the paper, or king, which flag accompanies the currency, as if somehow that is the source of value. And if you believe that lie, then it's easy to believe the next lie, that the only way to have a stable currency is to give control to a central bank that is unelected. And if you believe that lie, then you believe the next lie, which is that central banks are currently in control of their currencies, which is the funniest lie of all, because central banks have never been less in control of their currencies. We have this conversation in the US right now where we're saying, when will the Federal Reserve raise interest rates? September? December? And the conversation we should be having, and the conversation sophisticated economists are having, is, can the Federal Reserve raise interest rates? Because a lot of very, very serious economists now are quite convinced that they can't, that they have lost control of the monetary policy system, that they cannot simply decide to raise rates even if they want to, because central banks don't control currencies, because central banks don't give currencies value, because currencies get value from who uses them, not who issues them. And by presenting a simple truth, individual control of money, privacy, sound money, these simple concepts that exist in Bitcoin, what they do is they reveal the lie. How many people in this room like the idea of removing intermediaries from the money system? It seems like a logical thing. If I can send money from me to you, why do I have to use someone else? So I can pay them 3%, or 5%, or 9%, or 29% APR compounded? Why? It seems obvious. Because we see intermediaries as a cost. We see intermediaries as something that slows down economic flows. We see intermediaries as something that may have been necessary in the past, but now that we solved the underlying problem, we don't need them anymore. Who needs them? Move on. We live in a post-intermediary world. But that's not how they see it. Intermediaries are not an accident. Intermediaries are not a system for charging money and slowing things down. The intermediaries are the points of control. The intermediaries are the points at which people much better than you, much smarter than you, much more conservative and serious and important people than you can decide whether what you're trying to do with your money is a good thing for society or not. Now, you may feel that those decisions are best left to you. And then you would suddenly realize that the reason these intermediaries are so cherished is because, economically, we are living in a world of feudalism. In a world where those who are controlling the intermediaries do not believe that the peasants should have to decide what to do with their money, because the peasants are not sophisticated enough to understand the nuances of serious, important, sophisticated people. Where the central bankers don't believe that the peasants should be allowed to do what they want with their money, because then they might spend it in a way that is bad for society, and after all, daddy knows best. Paternalism, neo-feudalism. And when you hear the conversations that happen among banks, what you will see is that this idea is so well ingrained that they don't even see it for what it is. And what happens when, in a system of imposed neo-feudalism, in a system of economic imperialism and neo-colonialism, you introduce uncensorable, private, individually controlled money. You introduce concepts such as freedom of expression, freedom of association. That is a revolutionary act. You do not tell the lord of the manor that you want the vote. You do not tell the central bankers or the controlling systems or the regulators that it's your money and you want to control it. That is an absurd idea. And if you say that out loud, you are labeled a revolutionary. Now, I've probably been labeled a revolutionary, an extremist, because I believe that people should control their own money. And that's an extreme position to take. I believe that when I want to send money to WikiLeaks, and the US government removes the ability for me to do that by extorting Visa and MasterCard, and Visa and MasterCard will not allow me to send money to WikiLeaks, but they will allow me to send money to the Ku Klux Klan of Alabama. And this is true. At the time that they banned WikiLeaks, you could send money to the Ku Klux Klan. I believe that my feudal lord has made the wrong choice. And I believe in a system of money that gives me that choice. And if that is a revolutionary act, then I take comfort in the fact that this is a revolution without violence. This is a revolution without blood. This is a revolution of conscience. This is a revolution of independence and freedom of association and freedom of speech in the form of economic liberty. And if that is the case, then I will accept that Bitcoin is revolutionary. And I think, in the end, over the long term, we will win. Because the basic concept of individual control over money, of financial privacy, of access to finance on a global scale without barriers, without borders, without flags, without separations between kings and peasants, is the way of the world. And I'm glad to be part of that revolution. Thank you. I have no idea if I'm supposed to take questions or not, or if there's another speaker coming up next. So, Diego, do you want to tell me what to do next?
Well, I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
I need to turn this on. In the meantime, yes, I think we can do some Q&A.
All right.
While Alberto Vega from BitPay arrives. And
We've got a couple of oh, there he is.
oh, there you go. So we have time for 2-3 questions. No questions.
Over there.
Over there.
And over there.
Andreas, what do you think will be the category of killer apps for Latin America in the next few years?
What do I think is the category of killer apps for Latin America for the next few years? I think probably the most important one is remittances, foreign remittances, and right after that is import-export businesses. Generally, Bitcoin works best when you have a border, because borders are the one thing that don't exist in Bitcoin and exist in every other system. Now, in terms of remittances, it's funny because we're having this big argument in the United States about immigration. And, you know, Mexico is the #1 partner with the United States in terms of remittances. Billions of dollars. It's the most volume corridor in the world, United States to Mexico. But funnily enough, this is changing. Just as when our politicians are getting very angry about immigration, if you look at the statistics over the last couple of years, more Mexican immigrants are leaving the United States and coming back to Mexico because we don't have any jobs in the United States, and also because the food here is better. So, you know, who knows? The funny thing is that history is a very long period of time. So while remittances are important today and may be important for a long time, I think eventually you might be building your own wall to keep the gringos out.
Okay, two very quick.
Yes.
Where do you, or how do you square or reconcile your position with issues of controlling terrorist financing and anti-money laundering issues and things of that nature?
Well, I think everyone is absolutely interested in understanding the root causes of terrorism and other things that are evil for society. But the difference is understanding causes versus symptoms and means versus ends, right? So you don't treat the symptoms and you don't treat the means. 99% of terrorist attacks happen by people who wear shoes and also drive cars and use telephones, and I have it on good authority, drink water. Should we control the access to water, cars, telephones? Like, we don't even control access to guns. And we're going to worry about currency. Currency is not the problem. And more importantly, you can't control currency. The current financial system doesn't control currency. The current financial system doesn't prevent funding of terrorists because terrorists are funded in the two most important currencies in the world, oil and US dollars. And a lot of those US dollars they got from our own allies. So anytime you want to have a discussion about terrorism, I'm going to start saying uncomfortable things about Saudi Arabia, and then we can talk about Bitcoin when we're done. Another question in the back, I think.
Back there, yeah.
Is there a chance that Bitcoin can be part of a devaluation?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
Is there a chance that Bitcoin could be part of a devaluation?
You mean the deflationary aspect of Bitcoin?
Uh-huh.
No, not necessarily. You see, deflation is a bad thing in an environment where you have the ability to print money in unlimited quantities. Because if you consider this, if you have deflation in a currency that you can print in unlimited quantities, why are you having deflation? How could you possibly have deflation in a currency that you can print in unlimited quantities? There's only one answer. You have to have a catastrophic collapse in demand. So when you see the deflationary cycle in Japan, or where you see what's turning out to be a deflationary cycle in Europe and the United States today, it doesn't have to do with the restriction of supply of currency. That is unlimited. It has to do with a catastrophic collapse in demand. Now, if you think that deflation is the problem, what you're doing is you're misdiagnosing. The problem is catastrophic collapse in demand. And the reason we haven't seen deflation in other circumstances is simply because you have unlimited printing. But here's the thing. 3 years ago, I bought a MacBook Air. Anybody here like MacBooks? Yeah? I see a few MacBooks in the audience. Okay, I bought it for about $1,300. It's now you can buy it for $999. Based on the theory of deflation, one, I shouldn't have bought the laptop. I should have waited for 3 years and hoarded my money until I had a better laptop at a lower price, at which point I wouldn't buy that laptop. I would hoard my money to buy an even better laptop 3 years from now. That is deflation. The fact that a MacBook costs a third of what it did 20 years ago is deflation. You don't see too many people complaining about that kind of deflation because that's not deflation coupled with catastrophic collapse in demand. That's deflation because of the increase of purchasing power against a value of a good that's declining. And so that is good deflation. Now, economists talk all about bad deflation because in a currency where you can print unlimited amounts, that's the only deflation you've ever seen. Sound money is different. And I think we're going to see this play out. Listen, if you don't like Bitcoin because it's deflationary, pick one of the other 750 currencies that give you privacy, independent individual control, and are inflationary. The world is now open. We don't have to live in a world of one currency. We have choice. And that's the magic of Bitcoin. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andreas.